On October 28th, Etsy is going to report earnings, and they're expected by analysts to hit 58 cents EPS. Now, is Etsy a great stock to buy going into earnings? Is it something you should wait to buy after earnings, or is it something that you just stay away from? In this video, we're going to talk about Etsy, how it's evolved and really risen a lot since the pandemic. And a lot of people may first be hearing about Etsy because it has risen so much. We're going to talk about why that's the case. And is there a long-term growth play, or is this a stock that is only thriving during these times, and then when everything goes back to normal, the stock is going to take a hit? Well, we'll talk about that, but make sure you subscribe if you do enjoy this video, because we do talk about stocks and how you can beat the market very often on this channel. So the reason that Etsy in part has risen is because its mask sales have risen. Now, the thing with mask sales is that masks are in high demand right now, but they're not going to be in so much high demand in the future. And this was initially a big concern for long-term investors, because you look at a stock that has really accelerated because of the masks, and this is only going to be an income stream that exists for a short amount of time. Now, some people, they may wear their masks years after everything that goes on, just because that is the preference that they have. Like, I think you'll see people years from now still wearing masks, not like what you see now, but I think it will still be there. Regardless, we could all agree that when everything goes back to normal, mask sales are taking a big hit. But the thing about Etsy customers who have been appearing on the platform buying masks, like, these aren't your typical masks. These are custom masks. Etsy is a place for handmade. It is not a place for mass production like something you would expect from Amazon. But on the site, it's not just masks that are doing well. In fact, it's the mask sales that are propelling sales for Etsy's other business segments. So this isn't just a company that is riding mask sales or being one of these third-party sellers who just buys a tons of masks and sells them and does some very sketchy stuff with masks. That was more common at the beginning of the pandemic, and you don't really see that as much now because of all the crackdown associated with that. So Etsy does have a solid business model, and you do see some anti-big tech. You see all of these potential, like, break up all these companies, and Amazon has faced a lot of pressure, whether it's what you think about their warehouses or Amazon sellers being really upset with how Amazon treated them during Prime Day. You have more people moving over to places like Etsy to sell their stuff. And speaking of Amazon, they tried to launch a competitor to Etsy, a direct competitor based on the handmade stuff, based on all the types of stuff you would find on Etsy, and it was not successful. So a common rule of thumb for me is that if you see a big tech like an Amazon, a Facebook, an Apple, a Google try to copy you and they fail, they copied you because they liked your business model and they see the potential in it. And rather than acquire you, let's just copy you. And if they fail, it means your product, your business is so integrated with your customers. It is the place to reach that subset of people where you do have a lot of runway. Now, this isn't always the case. It's just a rule of thumb. You got to look at numbers to really make those types of conclusions. Now, another thing about a stock like Etsy is it's risen so much. Is this justified? Is this now an overvalued stock? And for a stock like Etsy, it's better to look at something like a price to sales ratio versus a PE ratio, because with a PE ratio, price to earnings, you want something under 20, and almost all these growth companies don't have that. They always have something that's ridiculously high, or they don't have a PE ratio. That pretty much means the company is not profitable yet. And if you only look at the PE, you do miss out on a lot of opportunities. PE is more of a value investor play, but it is a good metric for certain scenarios. If you're looking for growth companies, price to sales makes more sense. So Etsy currently sports a price to sales ratio of 15, while Shopify is hovering at 57. So if you look at those two stocks, which they do receive some comparison, Etsy is the, relatively speaking, undervalued play. Amazon's price to sales ratio is at roughly 5. But the fact that Amazon is a $1 trillion company, there is not as much upside from a market cap standpoint as there is for a stock like Etsy, which is a little under $20 billion in market cap at the time of this video. It's important to know the market cap because for a stock like Etsy to double, it just has to go like $32 or $33 billion in market cap because it's a little over 16 billion right now. For Amazon to double in value, they have to figure out how to go from 1 trillion or 1 point whatever trillion they're at now to over 2 trillion. So while in one scenario, you have to add $16 billion to your market cap, in another scenario, you got to find at least $1 trillion to double in value. And you need enough catalysts to support that type of growth, or else you could be in a lot of deep water later on. So that's why I do pay attention to market cap, and Etsy certainly has an attractive market cap and attractive growth opportunities. Going into earnings, it does make sense to start a position in Etsy, especially since they're down more than 10% going into their earnings. Now, sometimes it's an ominous sign if a company goes down going into earnings, but there has been a lot of stuff going on with the stimulus uncertainty, rising cases. There's been a lot of stuff outside of Etsy that has in part contributed to a little bit of a short-term downward motion. And also just because the stock has skyrocketed so much, some people just want to take profits. But you have another stock like Fastly, which I've talked about on the channel, and they plummeted about 30%-ish in one day because they lowered the revenue guidance, because TikTok is a big part of their revenue, and they're getting even more bearish. They received a bearish analysis, and there's just concerns swirling about Fastly's revenue. So while for that stock, I have been buying puts, I have been doing covered calls, for Etsy, I just see myself adding on to my existing position and maybe even buying a call, because I do think Etsy has a lot of potential to smash earnings, especially since going back to their last earnings report, which was Q2 2020, they had the expectation of hitting 39 cents per share EPS, but they shattered that, hitting 75 cents per share EPS. And when we look into the earnings report for Q3, what's going to come out, they're expecting 58 cents per share, and it hit 75 cents in the prior quarter. So there is a lot of potential for this upside performance. And I do think that since Etsy is just on this like incredible momentum right now, we can see some really surprising numbers. Now, it'll be interesting to see in 2021, after all these baked in 2020 numbers happen, will Etsy continue to rise? That's the question. And, you know, masks won't always be a thing, but they do have a new group of customers. They've gotten so many more people who will now continue to buy stuff on their site. So I think right now, Etsy makes a lot of sense. I think it has a lot of potential for years ahead, but just pay attention. It's going to be really important if you do buy shares and you wait for earnings and you become a long-term investor, make sure you pay attention to what happens to Etsy's sales and growth after the pandemic, because there is more to this story than mask sales, but you also want to just make sure and just keep an eye on that. Anyways, my recommendation, I think Etsy is a compelling opportunity for people who want to give it a shot. It is an e-commerce option with a much lower market cap than something like Shopify and Amazon, and doesn't have some of the overvalued concerns that big commerce has. I think Etsy is a better play than those other options. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I always love to hear from you guys. Smash this like button if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.